Hey, good morning, everyone. We'll keep letting people filter in, but we're going to get started. So this morning's open research office, our subject is human subjects research at UB, and Sevie is going to be our speaker today. So whenever you're ready, you can get started.
Okay, well, I'm Sevie Kandefer. I'm from the UB Clinical Research Office. We'll be reviewing some hopefully helpful information for conducting human subjects research at UB. The presentation, it's a high-level overview meant for people who are new to UB or new to research at UB. But even if you're an experienced researcher, hopefully you'll learn something new. I did. There is a lot of links. There's a lot of information and a lot of links. And I believe the slides will be available after the presentation. A PDF will be emailed to everybody. So we'll get started. So first, the players, who's who when it comes to research. Well, first, all research is conducted under the UB umbrella. So it doesn't matter where you're conducting the research. Research performed by UB faculty is done so under UB. The Research Foundation for the State University of New York, or RF, is a nonprofit education corporation that assists the university in identifying funding opportunities, procuring that funding, and administering that funding. So whether funding is from federal, state, industry, or other sources, research funding moves through RF. Now, RF signs all research agreements like contracts and non-disclosure agreements. RF signs those on behalf of UB. So PIs and other entities should not be signing research agreements on behalf of UB. Only RF does that. Now, neither UB nor RF are HIPAA-covered entities. So HIPAA does not apply to either UB or RF. The HIPAA does apply to our UB affiliates like UBMD practice plans, Kaleida Health, ECMC, and other entities. These are all HIPAA-covered entities. So faculty members seeing their patients at these affiliates and wishing to use their patients' personal health information or PHI for research must use an IRB-approved HIPAA mechanism, like a signed authorization or a HIPAA waiver, to move the PHI from the affiliate, which is covered by HIPAA, to UB, which is not covered by HIPAA. So all research is conducted under the UB umbrella, so PHI needs to be moved through an IRB-approved HIPAA mechanism from the covered entity to UB before it can be used for research. And on a financial note, if you want to use an affiliate's resources for research purposes, a facility agreement needs to be signed by the affiliate and RF. So the facilities agreement will include what resource or service is being used for research and the agreed upon pricing that RF will pay the affiliate for the resource or service. So there are several departments at UB that help support research. First is the Clinical Research Office, or CRO. This is a centralized office charged with administrative and financial oversight for all clinical research activities of the university's faculty members. All human subjects research passes through the CRO to ensure compliant, meaningful research. It's part of the CTSI and offers several services like contract negotiation, budget development, protocol development, pharmacy services, and regulatory assistance. So here's a workflow. Your first contact with the CRO will probably be during central study registration, where you first enter your study. And then particularly if you have an industry-sponsored project, you'll work closely with the CRO for contract and budget negotiation, affiliation agreements, and coverage analysis. They'll also help establish your account and then close that account out when the study is over. Sponsored Project Services, or SPS, is the first office to contact when developing a funding proposal. This is the official unit to prepare, review, and submit proposals for sponsored funding. They provide stewardship of awarded funds to ensure compliance with applicable regulations and policies, and this is required for all federal and federal flow-through funds. So if you or your PI has an idea or you found a funding opportunity, you would contact SPS using the website to find your department's SPS representative, and then work with SPS and the CRO to develop your budget. Once your paperwork is complete, SPS will review your documents for compliance and then submit the proposal to the sponsor on your behalf. The Office of Research Advancement, or ORA, is another department that offers help for external grant funding proposals. They offer administrative and technical support and can help you form research teams, identify collaborators, or refine and develop your projects and proposals. SPS is still your first point of contact, but ORA can offer additional help, and they can be reached at ubgrants@buffalo.edu. Okay, so the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, or CTSI, is one of more than 60 academic health centers in the U.S. currently receiving CTSA program funding from NIH and NCATS. The CTI has several cores that support clinical and translational research projects. Those include BIRD, which is Biostatistics, Epidemiology, and Research Design, the CRO, which we've already talked about. There are cores that include community engagement, drug development, imaging, informatics, pilot studies, recruitment and special populations, team science, and workforce development. You can find more information about all of these cores online, and there's also a link here if you would like to request services from one of these cores. Side note, all publications that result from the use of UB CTSA resources are required by the NIH to cite the CTSA, and there is language provided online. Okay, this slide is from the CTSI website and illustrates the wide network available to UB faculty, from the UB Health Science Schools to UB Clinical Institutes, research institutes, and community networks. There is a lot of potential for collaborations. Again, I recommend that you go to the CTSI website for more information. Okay, so you're starting a human subjects research study at UB. You know who you can contact. What are the platforms that you may need access to? Well, first, let's make sure you have a human subjects research study. Maybe you have a project that is quality assurance or quality improvement. And if that's the case, then you don't need access to any other platforms that are listed at the top of this table. Oh, sorry. So how do you know your project is QA/QI? You can go to the website listed here. It'll take you to this decision tree, and it'll help you determine whether a project is QA/QI. And if it is, it does not require IRB approval or review. You can also use there's an assessment tool. You can go through and answer yes, no questions, and at the end, print a self-certification form for your records that says your project is, in fact, a QA/QI. If, however, your project is research, then the platforms that you need access to will depend on the type of research project that you're conducting, whether it's funded or not, and what your role is. So, if you are conducting a study that is using a humanitarian use device, it's a retrospective chart review, or any type of prospective study, the first place that you're going to enter your study is into Central Study Registration, or CSR. And then from the information provided there, the CRO will create, but not submit, your submission in Click IRB, which is the module used for submitting studies to the IRB. Now, if you have a study that you think is not human subjects research or is exempt, you get to skip CSR and you would put that information directly into Click. But if you have one of these types of trials, it enters into CSR first, and the CRO then creates your IRB submission. So anybody listed as clinical research staff on a study does need to complete a Click COI module, which is where researchers disclose any research-related conflicts of interest, and that's done every year, or if there is a change. If you have a prospective non-interventional trial, a drug or device trial, or a funded behavioral intervention trial, you'll also need access to ENCORE. This is the Clinical Trial Management System, or CTMS, which is used to track subject enrollment and financials. And especially for drug and device studies, sponsors are invoiced based on the data entered into ENCORE, so it's important that it is complete and up to date to make sure everything is invoiced for. Click Agreements is where all contracts and agreements are uploaded so they can be signed by UB and RF's designated individuals. Again, PIs cannot sign research agreements. If you've uploaded an agreement in CSR, the CRO will put that into Click Agreements for you. But if you have another project that has another type of agreement that has not been entered into CSR, it's the investigator's responsibility to upload that. If you have a funded study, you're definitely uploading something into Click Agreements. And if you have a funded study, the Click Grants module also needs to be completed. This is the Click module that generates an account number, so your money has someplace to go. The CRO will enter and submit your funding proposal for industry-sponsored studies, and SPS will facilitate completion for federal awards. So Click Grants is the module that creates your account. RF Report Center is the platform where you can find fiscal details about your award or your award status. So RF Report Center is not technically a UB platform. It is an RF platform. Your UBIT won't work. You would need RF credentials, but those can be requested. CRMS is the billing compliance system, which is used to track standard of care versus research expenditures. And if you are spending any money, you would need access to ShopBlue, which is a fully integrated e-procurement system, allowing authorized UB faculty and staff to place orders for necessary goods and services. And possibly Concur, which is the travel and expense reimbursement system that's used to book business travel and submit business travel expenses. If you have a study that needs a safety committee application completed for biosafety, radiation safety, chemical safety, or stem cell research oversight, you would also need to access the Click Safety module. Okay, and there are additional platforms that are not necessarily UB, but the first is CITI. This is the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative program, which includes all required training for all research staff at UB. So if you are listed on a human subjects research study as study staff, you will need to complete your CITI training. Clinicaltrials.gov is a website and online database for clinical research studies and information about their results. So if you were working on an investigator-initiated interventional study with a drug or device or a behavioral intervention, your study may be a qualifying study, and it's the investigator's responsibility to make sure your study is listed on clinicaltrials.gov. There are a number of data collection and recruitment resources available. REDCap is a secure web platform for building and managing online databases and surveys. REDCap is offered at no cost to all UB faculty, but it can only be used for investigator-initiated studies. Trinetics is a de-identified clinical patient database that includes inpatient, outpatient, and claims data, and that can be used for feasibility, among other things. Buffalo Research Registry is a list of local people ages 18 and up who are interested in participating in research. Research Match is a free and secure tool that helps match willing volunteers with eligible researchers. There is a Participate in Research website that lists all studies at UB. You may need access to your affiliate's EMR or multiple EMRs, and then you want to make sure you are appropriately credentialed to access those EMRs. If you are requesting affiliate data, particularly from Kaleida, there is a platform for that. And if your study is funded and you're using US bank cards, you would need access to the US Bank website. This is a prepaid debit card program that has been developed to allow researchers to pay their participants using a prepaid Visa card. And lastly, if you are conducting a retrospective chart review, looking at mental health records from a facility on the OMH provider list, you would also need to access Klein IRB. UB IRB asks that you submit to Klein first, and then submit to UB IRB second. So you would need access to their website. And note about affiliates. Whenever you're working with an affiliate, particularly ECMC or Kaleida, you need to clearly identify what resources you need from that affiliate. So ECMC requires a paper application for all clinical studies. You submit it, the protocol, informed consent form if you have one, and your IRB approval once available. This process does take time. I recommend you submit to ECMC as soon as you can. You can always forward your IRB approval later. But when you submit this, ECMC will review your application, determine if you need access to their EMR, they'll see if you're credentialed to access their EMR. If you are not, you would need to complete a research associate application. They'll also want to know if you are using any hospital resources like pharmacy or nursing, and then determine the billing rate and the billing process for paying for those research services. Kaleida has the same process. They don't require a formal application, but they do have a very similar process that the CRO can facilitate. So when you are looking at your study and determining if you need to use any of your affiliates' resources, that's a good time to work on your coverage analysis. So this is when the investigator and CRO review the clinical events specified in the protocol to decide which events can be reimbursed by a third-party payer like insurance or Medicare or Medicaid, and which should be covered by the research study. So for example, if you have a subject that is getting a CT scan, they're in your study, you're going to use the CT scan results as part of your research, but that CT scan is part of their standard of care. So they'd be getting it whether or not they were in the study. then that CT scan can be billed to their third-party payer like insurance or Medicare or Medicaid. But if that CT scan is going to be done only for the study, if they weren't in the study, they wouldn't get the CT scan, then that CT scan needs to be billed to the study. So completing your coverage analysis is really reviewing all your clinical events and making sure that they will be billed to the appropriate source. And you can find more information online about how to do that. There are forms online. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to email careview@buffalo.edu. They can make sure that this is completed accurately. Okay, so the rest of the presentation is an overview of the UB platforms. Again, it's kind of a high-level overview, and there's going to be a lot of links. The slides will be available. Do we want to see if there's any questions on the first part of the presentation? No?
I don't have anything in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so to get started, city training we talked about. There are required modules for city training. Everyone has to complete the conflict of interest module, COI. If you're doing biomedical and clinical research, there's 2 city trainings that need to be completed. If you're conducting social, behavioral, and educational research, there are 2 different modules to complete. If you're doing all the research, you have to complete all the modules. There is information online to be found at these links. It walks you through how to set up your city account, how to register for the courses. And if you already have a city account with another institution, you can log into that account and then just affiliate with UB. If you've already done these modules, you don't need to do them again. They're good for 3 years. And as long as your account is affiliated with UB, you should be good. But there is more information to be found online, and the login is provided as well. Central study registration. So this is where you first enter your study if your home department is within one of the health science schools, you're within one of the mandated schools and doing a chart review, or if your study meets the NIH definition of a clinical trial, irrespective of school. You don't need to enter your studies into central study registration if you're seeking a determination of not human subjects research, an exempt status, or you're within a non-mandated school and you're not conducting a clinical trial by NIH definition. So if you are entering your study into CSR, the CRO will create but not submit your IRB submission, and they will upload any agreements into Click Agreements for you. You can also request support from the CRO here. You can ask for help with budget, recruitment, feasibility, things like that. And you can also designate PI proxies for your study. And I highly recommend that you designate at least 1 PI proxy for your study. They can submit submissions and click on behalf of the PI. So it's always helpful to have someone besides the PI who can click that submit button. There is more information online about CSR. There's a great video you can watch, and the login is provided here. So remember to click submit. We all forget at some point. The Click Compliance Suite integrates all aspects of grant management into a single system that includes IRB, IACUC, grants, conflict of interest, agreements, and safety. If you don't have a Click account, you can go to the website shown. Just make sure all your UB browsers are closed, but you can go to this website, fill out the request account section, and you'll have an account fairly quickly. COI module is an electronic system for management of research-related conflict of interest disclosures. Each researcher is required to complete an annual financial disclosure form at the time of applying for funding or prior to the release of funds, annually thereafter, or within 30 days of discovering or acquiring a new significant financial interest. So this needs to be completed whether or not you have a financial interest. All research staff need to complete this. And then every year you have to update it. And if there's no changes, honestly, you get an email every November reminding you to complete this. You can log in, check a box. It only takes a few minutes to update your disclosure if there's no changes. There is more information online and a lot of training materials on how to complete this module if you need them. IRB. So again, investigators enter submissions directly into Click IRB if you have a not human subjects research study or an exempt research study. You log in, you click create new study, and when you submit, you want to write in the comment that you're seeking one of these determinations. Otherwise, you've most likely entered your study into CSR. The CRO has created your IRB submission, but they're not going to submit it for you. It's still, you or your PI's responsibility to upload all the documents. And then at the end, click that submit button on the left. If nobody clicks the submit button, your IRB submission is not submitted. And if you don't see the submit button, that means that you are not the PI or the PI proxy, and you would need to let them know that the submission is ready to be submitted. But if nobody clicks that button on the left, it is not submitted to the IRB. If you are not sure if you have a human subject study or if it's exempt or if it meets the NIH clinical trial definition of a clinical trial, you can go to these links. You'll see these PDFs. There's also decision tools online that you can answer questions, and it will help you determine what type of study you have. So UB-IRB templates can be found in the Click IRB module within the library. These are required for investigator-initiated studies. You log into Click, you go to IRB, library, and templates. Templates are there. There's a template consent form. There's actually 3 different protocol templates. The main one is highlighted, but above that, there is a template for a retrospective medical chart review and a humanitarian use device template when you're submitting your protocol. Now, studies using a central IRB don't need to use UB-IRB templates, but they do need to make sure that UB-ICF template language is included in their external informed consent forms. So there's advocate language, and there is research-related injury language and HIPAA language that need to be in your external ICFs. It needs to mirror the language in the UB-ICFs. So while you don't need to use the UB informed consent form template for central IRB studies, you do need to make sure that research-related injury language and HIPAA language does mirror what's in the template. There is a lot of information online about how to navigate Click. So here is a starting point that would hopefully save some people from going down a rabbit hole when looking for directions on Click. And you can spend as much or as little time as you want with that. Quick note about client IRB. So if you are conducting a retrospective chart review, so you're going to not obtain patient's consent and you're going to use mental health records from a facility on the OMH directory of providers, which is a list of programs in New York State that are operated, licensed, or funded by OMH. The directory is here. UB-IRB has asked that you submit to Client IRB first. Client IRB will make a determination if that facility falls under their purview. If it doesn't, they'll send you an email or a letter saying it doesn't fall on their purview, and you include that letter with your submission to UB-IRB. If client does say it falls under their purview, you can probably have a reliance agreement signed and make client your IRB of record instead of UB-IRB, but it isn't an extra step. Click Agreements. It provides an electronic system for management of research-related contracts and agreements. It includes sponsored research agreements, clinical trial agreements, non-disclosure agreements, material transfer agreements. So anytime material is moving to or from UB, you need an MTA. The same thing with the data use agreement. Any data that moves to or from UB needs a DUA. These agreements are signed by RF. They're not signed by PIs. You can find more information online, and again, instructions on how to complete the modules. So Click Grants. This is the internal routing proposal for all sponsored funding submissions. It helps estimate the resources, time, and effort needed for a research project. Click Grants only applies to funded studies. So if you have an unfunded project, this module will not apply to you. The CRO submits it for industry-sponsored studies, and SPS will facilitate the completion of this Click module for federal awards. But it does create an account number. It assigns the Project Task Award number, or PTA number, which you would need to manage your award. And you can find more information online, and there's instructions for this module for PIs, co-Is, deans, and department heads. Compliance and billing. Okay, Encore. Encore is the Clinical Trial Management System, CTMS. It tracks subject enrollment and financials. Sponsors are invoiced based on data entered into Encore. The use of Encore is required for non-interventional studies, drug device intervention studies, and funded behavioral intervention studies. So this is just another way to say that. So if you have a study that ends in a red box, you don't need to use Encore. It does not apply to your project. But if you have a prospective non-interventional study or a funded behavioral intervention study, your study ends in a green box, you are required to submit limited standard accrual data, which is per patient entry of date enrolled, gender, age, ethnicity, race, zip code, and insurance type if you have it. Now, if you have a clinical trial that's a drug or device intervention, then you're entering standard accrual data into Encore, which is per patient entry, and all study activity details are entered into Encore. So that sounds pretty labor intense, but at the beginning of your study, you'll work with the CRO to create an Encore calendar. And then basically you're logging in, checking some boxes and entering any invoiceable costs into Encore. And it is important that that stays current and up to date because sponsors are invoiced based on the data that's entered into Encore. So we want to make sure everybody's getting paid for their work. So when that's complete and accurate, we can make sure that happens. There's a policy statement online about the use of Encore. There's more information and training modules. You do need your UBIT to access these training modules, but they're there. And if you ever need help with Encore, reach out to ctms@buffalo.edu. The CRO is more than happy to help make sure Encore gets completed. Like I said, it's really how we get paid. It's how you get paid. So it's important that it's complete and accurate. Okay, the Clinical Research Management System, or CRMS, is a billing compliance system, which is used to track standard of care versus research expenditures as determined by the coverage analysis. And this is necessary to ensure proper billing for research procedures done at one of our affiliate partners. Using that example of the CT scan, we want to make sure our affiliates know how to bill for that if they're billing the study or if they are billing insurance or Medicare or Medicaid. Usually it's the study coordinator that completes this, and the login is provided. Okay, award management. So when you receive funding, funding usually comes in one of two ways. Either you've been awarded a grant and you're going to receive that funding up front or on a grant-defined schedule, X number of dollars a year for so many years. So you receive that money and then you spend it on your research. You conduct the research, which is different than funding for an industry-sponsored clinical trial, which is really a fee for service, where the costs are often broken down into a per patient, per visit cost, where you're getting paid X number of dollars for informed consent at visit 1, and X number of dollars for vital signs, and X number of dollars for a physical exam, and that totals to like a visit 1 cost. So for industry-sponsored clinical trials, you do the work, and then you'll get paid at the rate that's determined in your contract. You'll get paid for that patient 1, visit 1. And you can get paid, 30 days later, 3 months later, 6 months later, but the payment comes after you've done the research, which is different than your grant when you get your money up front. But however your money comes in, SPS has taken that first step to establish your account in the Research Foundation Business System. Your account was assigned a Project Task Award Number, or PTA, which you would need to manage your award. And then you can view all the details of your award in RF Report Center. You can answer questions like how much money is on your award, how much have you spent, have you paid vendors, are there payroll changes? That can all be found in RF Report Center. There are 2 links to get you started with RF Report Center and the login here. And again, this is not a UB system, so your UBIT doesn't work. You do need RF credentials to log in. SPS has a lot of information online about how to set up your awards, manage your awards, and close your awards. So again, I recommend, you can spend as much or as little time as you want exploring these websites if you have questions about award management. Concur is the travel and expense system where UB faculty and staff can book business travel and submit travel expenses for reimbursement. That login is here. ShopBlue is a fully integrated e-procurement system allowing authorized UB faculty and staff to place orders for necessary goods and services. So if you are ordering scientific equipment or calibrating that equipment, ordering scientific supplies, ordering clinical tests for research purposes, purchasing advertising, or reimbursing a third party for salary or space, all those invoices get processed through ShopBlue. So this is a system that you process your invoices through to get your money out of RF to your vendors. So there is a lot of information online about how to use ShopBlue. Unfortunately, it's not the most intuitive system. So when you have questions, there is an email address that you can email your questions to, and they're pretty good about getting back to you. Now, there are also interdepartmental invoices. This is not a UB web platform. It's just another way to pay for goods and services when the money is going to or from a UB department. So there are 2 Excel templates. You can find them online. There's one for multiple IDIs, one for individual IDIs, and there's instructions online on how to complete those. But this is really, it's a bypass for ShopBlue when the money is moving from a UB department to a UB department. So for example, if you purchase anything from the stock room downtown, the UB stock room, you've ordered pipettes and bandages, they will send you an IDI at the end of the month. You'll write down your PTA number, the PI will sign it, and you'll send that form back. And so the money will move from your award to their account, and you have bypassed ShopBlue. You've kept the money internally, though. US bank cards. So you may need access to a US bank card website if you're using US bank cards to pay your research participants. These are prepaid Visa cards. There's 3 types: a reloadable card, a one-time digital reward, and a one-time plastic reward card. There are certain materials you need to have available before you submit your online application. The link for the online application is here, and there's also a link for more information. So this is a very busy slide, but bear with me. UB bank cards are the recommended way to pay your participants, but they are not necessarily required. Somebody at SPS has created this matrix. You can find it online. And again, these slides will be available. But this matrix shows all your options for paying your research participants and their benefits to each method, and then the guidelines and restrictions around each method. So while US bank cards are the recommended way to pay your subjects, I suggest you take a look at this and you determine which method is best for you and your subjects. Recruitment and data collection. So there are several recruitment resources available at UB. There is the Buffalo Research Registry, which is a list of local people ages 18 and up who are interested in participating in research. Trinetics is a de-identified clinical patient database that includes inpatient, outpatient, and claims data. So I recommend you should get access to Trinetics if you don't have it. It's great for feasibility. You can enter your inclusion-exclusion criteria, and it will give you the number of patients in the system that meet that criteria. It's completely de-identified. I believe Trinetics pulls from Kaleida and some UBMD practice plans. I don't think it includes ECMC. I don't think it includes GPPC, but it can give you an idea of how many patients are being seen with the conditions that you're looking for your research. Research Match is a free and secure tool that helps match willing participants with eligible researchers and their studies at institutions across the country. There's the Trial Innovations Network, a collaborative initiative within the CTSA program that's composed of 3 key partners: CTSA program hubs, the Trial Innovation Centers, and the Recruitment Innovation Center. REDCap can also be used as a tool to screen potential eligible volunteers for study participation. And if you have any questions about any of these resources, reach out to CTSI Research at buffalo.edu. They can give you any more information you need on recruitment resources. So REDCap is also a secure web platform for building and managing online databases and surveys. It can be used for investigator-initiated studies only, but it is offered at no cost to all UB faculty. You will need IRB approval to make your study go live, but you can request access and you can build your surveys, you can build your databases before you get IRB approval, but then to use them, you will need IRB approval for your investigator-initiated studies. But it's an excellent resource that, again, it's available to all UB faculty. Okay, clinicaltrials.gov. Registering your study with clinicaltrials.gov is a necessary step for investigators to be compliant with regulations. Not all studies need to be registered there. To see if your study does, you can go to the link provided. You'll see this checklist, and if you answer yes to all 4 questions, your study is required to be listed at clinicaltrials.gov. Sponsors typically register multi-site trials. So if you're working on an industry-sponsored multi-center study, the sponsor will list it for you. But if you're working on an investigator-initiated study and it meets the criteria, it is your responsibility to list your study with clinicaltrials.gov. There is more information online here. And if you have questions about this process, I recommend you reach out to Lynn or Mo at the CTSI, and they can help you navigate clinicaltrials.gov, posting your study and posting the results of your study. So there is a lot more information online. There is a research flow that's on the CTSI website. It breaks down steps for your research. There's also educational modules posted there. There's a CTSI YouTube page. Both of those platforms, both of those websites have a lot of videos that do a deeper dive into the platforms that we talked about today. So if you want to watch a video on Trinetics or REDCap, you can find those resources there. And it's a really great place to start if you're using a certain module. So it's just kind of just the summary of what we talked about. And if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to the CRO. There is specific contact information here, who to reach out to if you have specific questions. The CRO is here to help and support you. So please don't hesitate, reach out. So I know that was a lot of information and I went through it really fast. So thank you for listening. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. I can answer anything now.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any in the chat. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Sevie. That was absolutely excellent and overwhelming at the same time.
Yes.
So you said that those slides will be available. Will they be available on a specific location at a UB, website, or you will send it to each participant? Where can we find those precious slides?
I'm gonna send these slides out in a few days. Once the recording's posted, I'll send it all out in an email to everyone that attended.
Okay, so only the people who attended will be able to have those slides. They will not be.
That's how I normally send it out. If you know someone that wants the slides, you can send them to them, or you can send them my email and I'll send them to them. But that's how I normally do it, because that's how I take attendance.
Okay, I think I know of people who will appreciate those slides. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much.
And then, Sevie, there's a question that says, do you know offhand if US bank cards have a charge?
I believe they do. I think there's three different cards available, and I think some have a charge and some do not. But that information is definitely online, and you can find it if you use the link on the slide.